Welcome to another edition of Bothering the Band. I'm Ryan, and we are so honored today to have Mr. Keanan Duffty. Give a round of applause wherever you are in the world. He's a fashion mogul. He is a musician. He's an author. His resume does not stop. We are so lucky to have him. Welcome.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm glad you got my name right. You know, sometimes I get clean and dusty. So
that's actually one of my questions: is how often your name gets messed up?
All the time.
Yeah. Clean and dusty.
Sometimes it's two people. It's Keen and Usty or Ufty. It depends on where the junk mail, the spam mail's coming from, you know.
Yeah. I was gonna say, what do they like? What's the worst they've ever written on your Starbucks cup?
Well, I get Tina quite a lot, which is not, which it doesn't. It's not like the worst. I don't care, you know. But it's, I guess it's my funny accent. Maybe they, and you know, I thought because Kenan Thompson's such a famous actor, you know, and back in the old days when I was a kid, there was an actor called Keenan Wynn, who was like an old cowboy actor, you know. So when I was a kid, people kind of knew how to pronounce the name. And I think today people know because of Kenan Thompson, but obviously Starbucks employees maybe think I look more like a Tina than a Keenan. So there you go.
It's funny because I find that the easier names are the ones that get messed up more in places like that.
Yeah.
Where if you have a distinct name, those are the ones that are always correct. I always get Brian for some reason.
Right. Yeah. I could see that. Yeah. Especially in a noisy place, you know, when somebody's taking an order and it's kind of, you know, they've got a lot going on. They're focusing on different things. So, you know, I don't care. I'll answer to anything.
Absolutely. So I have to ask, what's your Starbucks order?
You know, I don't really go to Starbucks because I don't drink coffee. I know they have tea, but my favorite tea, my kind of obsession right now is turmeric and ginger.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Ginger tea's like my thing. I make the turmeric ginger isn't a fresh tea, but it's a bag tea. But I make ginger tea myself. So I buy ginger from the Chinese grocery store, and they have really big chunks of ginger, and then I chop it up. And no, I just chop it up into chunks and throw it. And with nothing, you know, that's it. Hot water and no honey, nothing, no lemon, just good old ginger.
I've been putting cayenne in my tea lately.
That's great too. Yeah.
You're talking to two avid tea drinkers. I used to work at a tea house in Manhattan, so I have a wealth of knowledge of tea that I can't get rid of. So I have to ask, first love, fashion or music?
First love, music, absolutely. Yeah. You know, as a kid, that's kind of what I was really into. And that's what got me into looking at the way musicians dressed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was kind of an interest in not fashion, but in style and image. But it was really the music that kind of got me into that. So yeah, music is the first love. Fashion or clothes and style and image are a sort of close second. I figured out how to make a living from fashion, though.
Of course.
Which is a fairly steady living. So there you go.
We started this because we love music, but we can't play music, so we have to be in the world somehow, and that's how this started.
Hey, listen, that didn't stop Brian Eno.
True, very true. I won't name names in case we can get a few people on the podcast, but there are a few musicians out there that have no musicianship.
Right.
You know?
I'm one of them. I mean, you know, I can sing out of tune and I can play guitar out of tune. So there you go.
Well, I'm right there with you. But I disagree. On that. I was listening to a bunch of your songs leading up to this, just putting it on in the background, trying to get focused. Is there a Slinky Vagabond? Is there a reason behind that name?
Yeah, when I moved to the US, I needed a working visa, and so I incorporated a company called Slinky Vagabond to sponsor me. And the name comes from a Bowie song, comes from Young Americans. It's a line in Young Americans. And this was like way back in the 90s. And then that became a brand name for my fashion label in the beginning. And it also became a name that I used for a musical project in the 90s. And then subsequently, again, it keeps coming back. It's like the zombie that won't die. The name keeps coming back. So there's a, you know, an attachment to me, and it goes back to the fact that, you know, I kind of needed to be legal when I came to the US.
Right.
I'm legal now.
So you started like your own company to sponsor you to come over?
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I was already here actually, but in the good old bad old 90s when you could probably get away with those sort of moves, but not probably not anymore. You know.
Yeah.
When students ask me how do I get a working paper, I tell them that story, but in a don't try this at home, kids kind of way, because I don't know that it necessarily works now. But I think I was meant to be here, so it worked. You know, I think I was lucky, and you know, it worked out for me.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky. We're happy you're here. So did you ever have a Slinky growing up?
You know, I didn't. It wasn't really a big toy in the UK. They were around, but it wasn't the kind of iconic toy that it is here. And then when I moved here in the 90s and I started using that name, I started buying vintage ones in flea markets. And at one stage, I had this really elaborate, I don't know when it was made, but by the rust on it, probably in the 70s. And it was kind of like a super Slinky. And it had various components. You know, obviously the company were trying to sort of increase their marketing reach, and they created different versions of it. But no, I have had several. I don't have one right now, but I was actually in my favorite store in downtown New York called the Balloon Saloon, which is a party store. Yeah. And they had some Slinkies and mini Slinkies in there. And I was with my wife and I was saying, oh, look, and I almost bought one again because they're a good stress relief as well.
Have you ever been able to successfully get them down the stairs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All the way.
That's a good question. I don't remember, but I've definitely had them go downstairs because we used to live in an apartment with on the fourth, it's a fourth floor walk up, and there were really steep stairs. And this was again in the 90s, and I used to play around with the Slinky on those stairs, but I don't remember whether it went all the way down to the bottom or not. Not sure.
As you can see, we are award-winning journalists who ask the very hard-hitting questions.
They're great questions so far.
So this is a perfect, straightforward question. If you had a dragon, what would you name her?
A dragon. Well, I am a dragon, first of all. I'm born in the year of the dragon.
I know.
So, God, that's a great question. Probably Ziggy, after my favorite cat.
Okay.
Who just passed away a couple of years ago, but she was lovely. And she was kind of the most undragon-like creature you'd ever meet. She was extremely timid. But I think it could be a good tribute if I was ever lucky enough to own a living dragon. or even a ceramic dragon. It doesn't matter. A toy dragon. Maybe I'll go back to Balloon Saloon. They have dragons in there, and I'll get one and name it Slinky.
You should write a children's book called Ziggy the Dragon.
Ziggy the Dragon. It kind of works, doesn't it? Actually,
it does.
Ziggy the Dragon.
And I'd buy it for my child. So you're in New York. I'm from New York. It's turned into, now it could be a drinking game. How many times I reference New York, I get in trouble a lot. However, how is a subway symphony arranged in your opinion?
You mean my project Subway Symphony?
No, the sound of the
subway. That's a really great question. Yeah, it's a multi-sensory experience. So you have to include the olfactory element as well. And it also depends on the time of year. It's pretty rich in July and August. And I think it's also rich then because you get an elevated sort of stress level in the city because people are kind of heightened. So you get a lot more acting out on the subway. But I think there's the rhythm section, which is the train wheels. There's the sort of vocal section, which are the call out messages from the station staff.
Yeah.
There's the sort of independent screaming person on the subway as well. Then if you're at 14th Street, you get these amazing opera singers and tenors and sopranos, violinists. So you get the kind of the rest of the orchestra situated there. So I would say it's those components, and probably situated really well around 14th Street, and 14th Street subway station, Union Square. So that's the symphony hall for the MTA.
Let's record an album there at 15th Street. We can go to the L platform and get like the folk musicians.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, we could go to like the Broadway, like the what is it, the 1, 2, 3. Well, that's down on 8th, and get some punk rockers.
Yeah.
But great answer.
Yeah, around the 4, 5, 6, I often see. So there's often dancers and dance performances happening around the 4, 5, 6, and then also classical musicians. Mm-hmm. I've seen one soprano singer there quite regularly, and then also some jazz players as well. And there was a really amazing Jimi Hendrix lookalike who used to be at Prince Street on the N and the R, but I haven't seen him around for a while. But he wore the band jacket, he had the hair, he had, you know, the psychedelic strat, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And he was great. I mean, the reason why I was asking is because I don't know if you know, but I did a record called Subway Symphonies, and
of course.
So I went around and found people on the subway, and you know, this weird guy going up to people who are playing and saying, "Would you be interested in playing on a track?" And of course, some people said, yeah, you know, many people were like, oh God, who's this, you know? And even if you give them a nice, amount of money for their playing and show some appreciation, they still don't call some of them. It's like,
yeah,
who's this?
I love that album. And we wanted to take a different direction, the actual sounds of the subway, you know?
Yeah, no, it's great. I kind of wish in retrospect I'd recorded some of that. I do have one track, which is I recorded a train and then I used it as a rhythm track. But just the sort of station announcers, that ambience is fantastic.
Yeah.
So
please
cool.
Stand clear of the closing door.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah.
Have you ever swallowed? This is a very dumb question. Have you ever swallowed glitter or gotten glitter stuck in your eye?
I've gotten glitter stuck in my eye, yeah. Many times. Yeah, many times. As a sort of late teenager, I was an avid makeup wearer, and still would be today if I could get away with it. But yeah, many times applying the glitter a bit too liberally, and then having a sort of a near miss from having to go and see an eye doctor.
Did you ever do any face paint like the Bowie lightning bolt?
I've done it once for a Bowie tribute show called Bowie Ball that used to be in New York about 12 years ago. My friend is a makeup artist named Charlie Green, and she painted it in black. And I wore a leopard skin jacket and sort of a black t-shirt. So it kind of worked in black. I wanted to do kind of a take on it. And I did actually, I made a birthday card for myself to invite people to a birthday party, as you do, to invite people to a birthday party years ago. And I actually scanned the Aladdin Sane lightning bolt and put it onto a childhood photograph of myself. And a lot of people said, "Oh, so you were really into Bowie when you were a little kid, then?" You know, and I thought, "Not really. No, it's just good Photoshop."
Yeah. Do you have any? Do you have any sexy Sex Pistols stories?
Sexy Sex Pistols stories.
Yeah. Because the reason I ask is, they're known for, not the glamorous bunch, so
only that I've stayed with my buddy Glen Matlock many times when I've been in London, and I've seen him in his underwear on more than one occasion. I I saw Steve Jones when we were having lunch or dinner in a Chinese restaurant, and I was visiting him one time, and I gave him a bunch of T-shirts that I'd made especially for him. And so he went to the bathroom to put them on, but he kept coming out with no shirt on, like putting the T-shirt on, but like not staying in the bathroom to actually do it, which was quite funny. So yeah, I could say I've seen Steve's nipples a few times, more times than.
This was at a restaurant?
This was in a restaurant, yeah. You know, Steve's not shy.
Yeah. Obviously. Oh man. Do you have a favorite James Bond?
The classic, obviously Sean Connery. I really love Daniel Craig. I thought he did an amazing job. My favorite James Bond didn't get to be James Bond. That was Idris Elba, who I thought would have been amazing. And I wish they had, I kind of wish Daniel Craig had stepped away one movie earlier and Idris had been able to do at least a couple for his age, because he's kind of aged out of it now. I guess when they bring in a new Bond, they need to have at least 3 movies, probably 5. And I thought Idris has the gravitas and the grit, but he also has a polish, and he has that darkness as well. I don't know if you ever saw Luther, the TV series.
Of course.
You know, I love that, and I think he would have been amazing. I think he would have been really amazing, and I'm kind of scared who they're going to get next, because I'm worried.
Do you think he's too old? Why would
Idris? I think Idris he's like, I don't know how old he is now, but I think he's like mid-40s. And I don't think he's too old to do it now, but I think they could only do one movie with him probably. And then he would be too old for the character. Because in the books, the character's much younger, the character's in his early 30s. And, you know, it got ridiculous when, I mean, I wasn't a fan of Roger Moore. You know, Live and Let Die is a great movie for what it is. But Roger Moore was a bit too sort of Austin Powers for me.
Yeah.
You know, and Pierce Brosnan I thought was okay. You know, the others have been okay, but I thought Daniel Craig was great because he had that damaged quality, and Idris Elba has that too in his performances. You know, and he was amazing in The Wire, and he's been, you know, amazing in a lot of great movies. But I love him in Luther, and I think, you know, that he's got the swagger, but he's also got the damaged, the darkness to him as well, which is, there's a grittiness which I think Bond needs. Otherwise, it gets very campy very quickly.
Yeah.
And that was what I thought was, you know, Pierce Brosnan. There was a little bit of campiness to that, which is fine, but I don't think it's going to work in, you know, like the 21st century for it to be spoof, because Austin Powers and many other movies already spoofed it. But there you go. That's my 10 cents.
That's it. I mean, you put so much more intelligence than I expected into my silly question. But I'm such a movie geek that I agree. I think Pierce Brosnan got stuck in that timeline of like 90s cheese.
Yeah.
GoldenEye is great.
GoldenEye's great. Yeah.
It's very dated. It has that 90s cheesiness on it, you know, mid 90s, where, like you said, Bond should have that darkness. And I'm gonna start a Twitter campaign for Idris Elba again.
Yeah, I mean, I think it had a lot of momentum. I think a lot of Bond fans thought that could have been good. And then, you know, and Barbara Broccoli had said, you know, he certainly would have been a consideration, but I think it kind of cooled. And I'm just a little bit concerned they're going to go for somebody really young, like a Robert Pattinson type, who, you know, because they're going to go for the so-called millennial audience. And I think that's going to mess with a lot of diehard Bond fans. So,
yeah, they're going to go for a skinny, like brooding millennial, and it's gonna lack a little bit of toughness that we're used to. I feel
Michael Fassbender, I think, also could be amazing, but I think he's the same situation. He's probably now in his career too old to do more than, let's say, 1 or possibly 2 movies. But that might be fine. It might be fine just to have, you know, a Bond that just has a couple of movies. But they tend to sign them up for like 4 or 5 movies, and then, you know, I would hate to see somebody playing Bond at my age. You know, it's sort of like what's going on? You know, like somebody would of my age would be too old to do all of that. So, you know, you got to, it's got to feel real. I mean, I know it's a fictional character, but it's got to feel substantive in some way. So
yeah. Love it. I'm excited to see it. We'll have to reconnect once they announce who the next Bond is and dissect it a little bit.
Yeah.
If aliens came to Earth, what do you think they'd do first?
Leave.
Fair enough. Oh, we're going to leave it right there. That's a perfect answer. All right. I have to ask. So I read a couple interviews with you, and this phrase stuck out to me. What the hell is a Cuban heeled winkle picker?
Oh, so it's probably a term that is politically incorrect to use today. It means, so it's a shoe. It's a description of a shoe. A Cuban heel was probably about 2.5 to 3 inch high heel on the heel of the shoe, and it's shaped inward. So it starts where the back of the foot ends, the heel ends, and then it kind of scoops inward. So it moves to a smaller base. And then the front of the shoe, a winkle picker, is the point. It's a sharp point. And it's winkle picker is describing the kind of piece of wood that you would use to take a like a clam out of its shell. In England, they're called winkles.
Okay.
And so the pin that you use to take the winkle out of the shell is what was used to describe that shoe. So a Cuban heeled winkle picker is a particular kind of boot. It's really what the Beatles wore. It's what they call Beatle boots. That would be the sort of broadest description of it that maybe more listeners would get.
What's the difference between that and like a mod boot?
So for me, if you say to me mod boot, I think of the sort of 60s go. I think of that as a woman's boot, a sort of 60s go-go boot, if you like. So you know, just below the knee, more of a slightly squared toe, and with probably like a 2-inch heel, maybe. So not a high heel, but with some heel on it. And usually they were like white patent leather, you know, the kind of classic mod boot. Now, if you mean a guy's mod boot, it's essentially the same type of thing, you know, like a sort of pointed toed, ankle length zip up boot that you would sort of slip on. You know, like the Stones or the Kinks, or I don't know what the Who wore, actually, I don't remember, but certainly the Beatles wore what they call Beatle boots. But it's pretty much of the same thing. They were made by this dance shoemaker called Anello and David in London. That's where all those bands used to go, and they used to make ballet shoes and boots and custom. But they were amazingly inexpensive, actually, until probably, I remember buying a pair in the early 80s, and they were not, I was in college, so they, you know, they weren't a lot of money. Now they're probably, you know, like everything custom made, are probably a fortune.
Yeah. Well, now that we got Cuban heeled winkle pickers out of the way, when was the last time, and there's a follow-up to this, when was the last time you were on a catwalk?
Good question. Probably in 2017, 2018. I was working with a fashion school in Italy. I have been for the last 3 or 4 years. And at one of their graduation shows is probably the last time I was on a catwalk, not myself walking on it, but actually standing on it before or after a show. So that would have been the last time. Yeah, probably 2018. So 3 years ago.
Are you still working for Parsons? Is it called?
Yes, yeah. I'm the director of, my official title is Director of Fashion Programs. So I create programs for Parsons. Yeah.
Oh, so exciting. When was the last time you were on a stage, music stage?
Good question. Good question. It was obviously before the pandemic. That's a good question. Probably 2008, but it would have been 2018. maybe 2019. Yeah. So a while ago. It feels like it's so weird with this whole pandemic. It feels like everything was really pre and post this era, and it seems to have extended for so long. It feels like it's now years and years, even though it is 15 months, but it feels like it's a lot longer.
Yeah, time is definitely taking on a different meaning altogether, because you could have asked me, what did you do last week? And to me, that feels like yesterday or a year ago, you know?
I know, it's bizarre. It's bizarre what everything, the way time's been sort of warped by everything that's happened. You know, and I think in you know, a decade we'll look back on this era. I feel particularly bad for kids that are growing up in this era that are, like, say, college age kids who've gone away to university, and they haven't actually gone away because they're still at home working remotely, probably. And they haven't had the experience of that first year in college, you know, of going wild and being away from home and just doing all the mad stuff that you should do in that first year.
Oh, it's such an exciting time.
It's a great time, and it's not something that you can, that sort of year of being 19, 20 years old, you can't get it back again. You know, it's very particular. So I do feel, you know, I do feel for students when I speak to them and they are, you know, sort of depressed about this time in some ways. And I really do feel for them because, you know, for me, it was such a discovery being away from home and being in a completely different city and meeting a whole really inspirational bunch of colleagues and peers. You know, brilliant. So,
and each year after, you know, school, you know, into college and university, each year is different. You're different. You grow. First year, 18 to 19 is different than 19 to 20.
Yep.
And it was like you said, it was so much fun. I don't envy the kids that are dealing with this, you know?
Yeah.
What's the weirdest place you've ever seen your clothes being sold or worn?
That's a great question. I mean, so, you know, I sell to some pretty interesting stores. I mean, I guess probably the most interesting to me, in a sense, was Trash and Vaudeville. When that was around, and when we used to sell to them, especially in the 2000s, because we kind of had, you know, what you might call a elevated type of product. And a lot of other fashion people would say to me, "Oh, I saw your clothes in Trash and Vaudeville. Why do you sell there?" And I would say
that was on like Bleecker, right? Bowery.
It was St. Mark's. Yeah, it was St. Mark's, and it was really close to Bowery.
Yeah.
It was an iconic punk rock store. And you know, Ray Goodman, who was the founder of it, had been there since 1973. Lovely guy. Sadly, Jimmy Webb, who's passed away last year, was the kind of face of front of house of the store for many, many years. Total rock and roll guy. And it was a brilliant place to, you know, it was real rock and roll. I mean, every Iggy, Slash, they all would go and shop there. Debbie Harry, you know, and then, you know, they'd get Avril Lavigne, and probably, if it was open today, Billie Eilish, you know, like the kind of pop kids would be in there as well. So it was, for me, it was very natural. But I think for a lot of other people in fashion, they would kind of find that strange and weird. And then in terms of wearing stuff, I think, you know, I would always be shocked to see people in like an airport or something like that. And occasionally people would come up to me and say, "Oh, you know, I've got your t-shirt," or "I bought your Dr. Martin boots," or whatever. And that was always sort of strange because, you know, you don't expect to get that kind of personal interaction with someone, you know, who's sort of bought your stuff and is wearing it. You often don't. I mean, I'm not like a label that is on everybody's back, so it's not like the Gap or something. You know, when you actually run into someone and they're wearing something of yours, it's a brilliant surprise, you know, and it's kind of, and they usually, you know, I've never had anyone say, "Oh, I bought you this jacket and it fell apart. You know, what are you doing?" You know, so it's usually positive stuff.
And your stuff is so distinct and more closer to artwork. So I'm assuming it's much more personal and close to the heart when you see it out in the world.
It is, and it's funny with social media as well. There's a guy that I've become friends with who's in Texas. His name's Brian Walker, and he's probably the preeminent collector of Dr. Martens shoes, certainly in North America. And he's posted pictures of these rooms that he has where they're just filled with every iteration of every collectible Dr. Martens shoe. And he has all of the shoes that I did as a collaboration with Dr. Martens. He has sneakers that we did with Reebok. And he just messaged me the other day through Facebook, and he said, I've got this like personal part of my closet, which is all of Keanan Duffty stuff. And I've got your music and your book. And, you know, it's so endearing when people do that, because I think when you're a creative person, you're operating quite often in isolation, you know, and you don't really know, you know, you sort of, I do want to connect with people and interact with people. You know, and I actually do want to hear from people if my jacket fell apart, you know, because I want to take care of it and you know, be responsible about it. But generally, people are super positive, and you know, it's always a thrill, and I'm always grateful for it.
Oh, that's fantastic. We got to find the Doc. Well, I got to ask the Doc Marten guy to find me the Doc Marten collaboration with Pendleton that they did.
I'm sure he has it. I'm sure he has it. It's like he has. It seems to have every shoe. I know Dr. Marten are kind of working with him too, because he's almost like an archivist for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Cool. So another follow-up, where's the weirdest or strangest place you've heard your music being played?
That's a good question. The weirdest place.
Or not even weird, a surprise, or, you know, like you could be like a Starbucks or something, you know?
I think, well, I think so. My mum and dad tell me this great story. So it's not from me hearing the music, but when I first started making music in the 80s, I did a session for a radio DJ called Janice Long, who was one of the first female DJs in BBC Radio. And she was like a really big supporter. And she had us do a 4-song session where you go into Maida Vale Studios in London and you put down 4 tracks, and they're played exclusively on that radio station. And my mum and dad were moving house. I'd already left home by then. I was living in London, and they were moving house. And as they had all of their furniture packed into their van, and they were driving to where they were then going to live. The radio broadcast was happening with the session played live. And they happened to have you know, it was like a 7 o'clock show or something in the evening. And they happened to have the radio switched on. And Janice Long said, and next week got Keanan Duffty with the first of 4 songs in this session. And my mum and dad said they listened to them all on the journey to where they were moving to. And it was kind of, you know, very synchronous moment, you know, like an amazing synchronous moment. So I guess that's weird because of the synchronicity of it.
Absolutely.
And I actually didn't hear it because I didn't have a radio, but I knew it was on, you know, but so they heard it, and then they called me with a obviously landline, because in those days, and when they reached where they were living, and they called me and they said, we heard you on the radio. It was so exciting. So that's probably the best answer I could give to that question.
Oh, I can't, that must have been so magical for them, because that generation, the radio was so important, you know, so that's, you made it, you know, like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was kind of an affirmation of, you know, I mean, I think creativity is very abstract, and for anybody that does something in the creative realm, you know, especially family are always concerned, like, how are you going to make a living doing this? How are you going to support yourself? Because it's not as tangible as other careers, you know?
Yeah.
And so to have something like that, you know, to walk into a store and see, you know, a family member's clothes hanging there, or hear something on the radio, or see a piece of art in a gallery, I think it becomes real for people then, and they say, oh, okay, this is it, you know. And I don't think it has to be that either. I do believe, I think everybody has creativity, and it's great to express that and continue to express that throughout your life. I don't think anybody should ever stop doing that, because we all draw when we're kids, right? And we make stuff, and at some point somebody says, oh, now you got to, little Jenny or Johnny, you got to grow up and get real. But I don't agree with that. I think it's great to have that release emotionally and spiritually for a person to be able to just keep doing stuff, you know, without any judgment and without any pressure.
Even self-judgment too, because my first love, and I'm a poet, and imagine telling your folks that's what I wanted to do, you know, And I also teach poetry, and the main thing I try to get out first is that self-judgment where you're writing and you're already judging each line. Where it's like, don't worry about it, just keep going. Or painting, and before you're even remotely done, you're like, this sucks, and you're that self-sabotage judgment, essentially.
It's and I think it is partly societal, because it happens to a degree in education. When you're a kid in school, you're kind of streamed towards things that you're quote unquote good at. It may be that you're particularly good at math, but you also love poetry. Yeah. But then the school's kind of like, well, you get more further in your career with math. I mean, who's to say? But they might think that and push you towards that stream, and then you're guided away from something that actually you're best at what you love doing. I believe you're best at what you love doing, and you're most fulfilled at doing that. So I love, as a poet, I don't know if you're familiar with John Cooper Clarke. He's like
of course.
Yeah. So somebody, in school, obviously in high school I studied poetry, but John Cooper Clarke was like, fuck, this guy, a punk rock poet. He was social commentary, funny, observational, exactly up to the minute, really right, very present, right there and then. And that was amazing, an amazing lesson in high school that I got from somebody who wasn't in my, it wasn't part of my syllabus.
Yeah.
So and totally inspirational. So I think, and he's somebody who spent a lifetime doing something supposedly on the fringes, yet today he's an honorary doctorate. He's one of the greatest living English treasures. And 40 or 50 years ago, his family might have been saying to him, when are you going to get a proper job?
Oh yeah. I remember my family telling my family, oh, this is what I want to do. I write poetry. And then it started publishing, and my family being like, it doesn't rhyme. And I'm like, yeah, it's not really supposed to. And in the same vein, the same regard, I didn't like writing or reading when I was younger. And it wasn't until I discovered, like you said, outside of that syllabus curriculum, other voices that I liked, and that's where I went.
Right.
Totally left field. So
yeah.
Do you find that in your so do you teach at all at Parsons, or just design the curriculum?
So I don't teach. I teach in a limited way now. I used to be the director of a program which I created, and I taught extensively in that. I shifted into a slightly different role at the beginning of this year, which is to create curriculum and syllabi and courses for what they call continuing professional education. So it's aimed at postgraduate studies and professionals. But I do love teaching, and I love working with students. I particularly like master's level students, because they've kind of got it a little bit more figured out, and they sort of have a trajectory that they may be following, so they may have a kind of career path that they're already on. And I do enjoy that, because I like helping them to figure out how to build a career out of what they love doing, and sort of finding that road. But it always goes back to, what do they want to do? And then, okay, how do we figure out how to get this to happen? How to make a learning experience that's fulfilling for them and fun and engaging. And also to then have a platform from which they can, actually be in the world as a fashion professional, and actually make a living from it and be happy doing it. That's my objective.
That I think that's super fantastic, because it's a practical view of art, making art your career, and actually okay, you love it, you want to do it forever, here's how you do it forever.
Yeah, it's very Warhol. It's very Warhol, because I always thought Andy Warhol was brilliant from that perspective. He wasn't afraid to bring creativity and commerce together and find a way to sort of make it work for him, and actually to have a really amazing social commentary. even though he pretended it was like nothing, but he was actually really making a tremendous comment about society.
Yeah.
So yeah.
He was good at tricking us to look inside of ourselves. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
If you could dress one person, live or dead, that you haven't already, who would it be and why?
Well, it would be William Burroughs.
Great answer.
But I could never dress him better than he dresses himself. So
finery.
So I don't know. I don't know what I would have him wear, other than go into his own closet and maybe style his clothes into a look for him. But it would end up being what he just is so iconic.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say in a way that I would dress William Burroughs, because I couldn't do better than he already did. He was so effortlessly stylish, and that I think that's what I really love. That it's beyond fashion. Fashion is very trivial and it's very trend driven. Style is something that one creates for oneself. And I see people on the street who are incredibly stylish and look so much better than anything in fashion today, because they have an effortlessness. They are not overthinking it. They're just doing it. And so I think, that's why my answer is Burroughs, but it would be hard to figure out what to put him in. I certainly wouldn't put him in a punk rock t-shirt or anything like that. I think it would.
Oh, that was, you're talking to the right people. That was a great answer. I love Burroughs. About 10 years ago, I was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I was teaching actually, and I made this intern at the University of Kansas drive me to his birth home.
Right.
And it was just a nondescript house. People were living there. There was like toys in the front yard, and I'm outside, and this is 10 years. So I don't think I even had a camera phone. I just like got out of the car and took it in for a second and then got the hell out of there. Love Burroughs, love Junkie, love Naked Lunch. It's a tough one.
My wife gave me a poster as a Christmas gift about 5 or 6 years ago, and it's from an event called Final Academy, which took place in Brixton in London in the early 80s, and it's signed by John Giorno, Genesis P-Orridge, and Burroughs. But Burroughs' signature, since I've had it, and I have it hanging in a darkened place in the house, it's faded away. And it's so perfect because he used to be called the homme invisible, the invisible man, and he's even disappearing from that poster. It's so Burroughs, like you couldn't, and my wife is like, oh, I'm so angry I got that poster for you and now his name's almost gone, and I'm like, yeah, but isn't that brilliant?
Yeah, it's spot on Burroughs. I love going on YouTube and listening to his voice read. That's because his voice is it's gravel and I love it.
Yeah.
Good answer. Wow. So this is a hot debate. Who do you think invented punk rock? This is tough. For
William Burroughs, probably William Burroughs.
Well, can't argue with that.
I mean, look, if you he's on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. There's the band Soft Machine. There's Steely Dan. Then I know they're not punk rock, but Patti Smith, for example, wouldn't really, was extremely influenced by Burroughs. Throbbing Gristle wouldn't really have existed in that incarnation. Genesis P-Orridge was archiving Burroughs' work. All of that, the cut-up technique that Bowie used, so many punk bands inadvertently used that idea, rejecting all of society. I think, that's certainly a Burroughsian approach. I think you wouldn't have gotten the CBGB scene and the New York scene in the same way without his influence. And he was there. He was in the bunker on the Bowery. at the time, so I would put my money on Burroughs, because I think without him, the Sex Pistols wrote "God Save the Queen," and in response, Burroughs wrote "Bugger the Queen." So he actually went further than the Sex Pistols. So as a letter and as an essay, I think the style of the cut-up technique, which is Brian Geison's invention, as Burroughs says. So much of that was so prevalent in punk. So I think between those two, they kind of invented a counterculture as we know it, from the beatniks through until the present day. I mean, cutting, what is the internet if not a massive cut up? What is social media if not a massive cut up? So, for me, that's where I would put my money.
And also like about the internet with Burroughs, like that stream of consciousness, Naked Lunch style, right? Sure. What you think immediately, that's all social media.
Sure.
Not to toot your own horn, but here we go. That answer is why we do this, because you could have been like the Sex Pistols in London, the Velvet Underground in New York, and that was the answer. So the fact that you went that way, man, love it. You should see I have a whole thing of notes while you're talking. I'm writing. Oh man.
I've got more and more rubbish. Just I can keep spouting the rubbish.
Oh, well, we have a couple more dumb questions, so we're going to keep going. Do you have a go-to or favorite sparkling water?
I don't actually know. I don't really drink sparkling water, to be honest. I drink. I use a brighter or Brita water filter.
Okay.
And I'm drinking water right now, just clear water. Usually I throw like a lemon in it or something, or a bit of ginger. But I don't really drink sparkling water.
No. Well, we do. So
good for you.
Well, no, tell me if I'm wrong, and this just the idiot American, isn't that do most Brits go for sparkling water?
Well, I think it was very much a kind of a sort of continental European creation. With Perrier, for example, from coming from France and Italy. I mean, when I'm in Italy, actually, I must say I do occasionally drink a sparkling water with a cup of coffee, because it's just the way the way Italians serve coffee is like they serve you a coffee, they give you water with it, and often it could be a sparkling water, for example. So I think France, Italy, probably are the originators of sparkling water. I don't know. I mean, the first time I heard of sparkling water was Perrier, and it was in the 80s, because there was a place in Soho that was called the Soho. Soho was like a red light district and really super sleazy, super dodgy, but great. It was where all the theaters were, and it was where my college, where I went to college, was. So my window where I used to sit was on the street level, and it faced out onto a street where there were, brothels, a very amazing French restaurant. And so you get like suddenly Terence Stamp walking past the window, or John Hurt, or who were in a play or something. And then one day round the corner, this really fancy brasserie opened called Soho Brasserie. And we were all like, what? And we went in there, and they were like, no, you can't come in, go away. And we could see on the bar all of these green bottles. And we're like, what's that? It's Perrier. Perrier, what's that? It's water. Water in a bottle? Yeah. And it's like, it's £2 a glass or whatever. What, you have to buy it?
Yeah.
Doesn't it just come out of the tap for free? So it's, 30 odd years ago, I guess. It's that French phenomenon kind of took hold globally.
You have to know this movie, After Hours?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That's when you started talking Soho like that. That's where my mind goes, is to After Hours.
Yeah, and actually, when I first moved to New York, my wife lived in this brilliant building on Prince Street between Crosby and Lafayette, and it's a little house. Mm-hmm. It was built by Woodrow Wilson for his daughter, and she'd been living there for a while. It was like a crumbly, falling down house, and her upstairs neighbor was Harmony Korine,
Oh yeah.
and Chloe's 70. And it was when he just made kids.
Wow.
And it was totally after hours. So at night, her door was completely covered in graffiti. You didn't know that people lived there. And at night, the whole neighborhood was just completely dark, exactly like after hours. So even in the 90s, when I first moved to New York, it was still kind of had that 80s vibe. It was still like a bit, you didn't quite know what was going to happen.
Yeah, a bit sketchy. For those of you listening who don't know After Hours, it's an underrated Scorsese film that's fantastic. Go watch it for a little glimpse of Soho back in the day. Since we talked about Burroughs, what's the last book you read?
I am just reading again, because I read it when I bought it when it came out in 2014. I'm reading, I'm going to get these the wrong way around, but I think it's Boys, 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 Music, Music. No, it's Close, 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 Music, 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 Boys, Boys, Boys by Viv Albertine, who was a guitar player in the Slits. And I watched a TV interview with her the other day. She has another book that was out recently. And so I pulled that out to read again because there was some stuff in it that I'd forgotten that she talked about. And so I started rereading it. And to be completely cliched, yesterday I have a very old copy of On the Road, and I took it down from the shelf, and it's a paperback cover, and it's probably from like the 70s or whatever, and the cover came away from the spine of the book, and so I was sort of like gluing it back together very, very carefully with rubber bands and Elmer's glue, with the intent of actually rereading that as well.
Yeah.
But the last new book I read was a book called Women I've Undressed by Ori Kelly, who is the famous Hollywood costume designer who was allegedly Cary Grant's partner. And he designed costumes for so many of those like golden era of Hollywood movies. And he was an Australian guy. He was had an amazing life story, came to New York, kind of fell into this costume making industry, moved to Hollywood, and became, one of the biggest names in Hollywood movie costuming. And I got his book about probably a month ago or so, and I read that. It's huge. It's like a major tome, and it's full of photography and stuff as well. So that's the last relatively new book that I bought. So you can see pretty much biographical stuff is what I'm into. Biographical and beats.
Yeah, that's great. Very similar tastes. I have a giant Kerouac tattoo on my ribs. Abby is a huge fan of the Dharma Bums. So you're in good company with us. I know the next books I'm going to read because I just wrote these down. Very, very dumb question. True or false? Coldplay sucks.
My gut reaction was to say true.
Yes.
But I've never really listened to them, to be honest with you. The only time at the end of Shaun of the Dead, the movie Shaun of the Dead, they have a spoof like spot where there's daytime television, and they have a cutaway to Chris Martin on a TV show saying he's doing like a, Save the Zombies sort of charity event. Yeah. And it made me think at that time, that movie's an old movie, but it made me think he does have a sense of humor about himself. So he can't be all bad, but yeah, I kind of think they probably suck. If I ever listened to them, they'd probably suck.
I agree with you. First instinct is suck, but then you start to think about it and you're like, yeah, they're probably not so bad. I'm not going to run out and buy a record, but yeah.
Noel Gallagher said they were music for bedwetters at one stage, which I thought was a brilliant quote. And then more recently, he sort of said, oh, well, Chris Martin's all right. He's a nice bloke.
Yeah. Okay. Donna Karan or Diane von Furstenberg?
I would probably say Diane von Furstenberg because of her sort of iconic Studio 54 status. I've met both of them. They're both big personalities, very successful designers, and very iconic as well in their own right. So I have tremendous for their styles are not an aesthetic that is my aesthetic, but I definitely respect them both as designers and as creative people. But I think, Diane for me, or Dion, as she told me is the correct pronunciation, Dion, because of the Studio 54 association, I do really like that whole aspect. And I think it's kind of that Warholian moment which appeals to me.
Do you wear Crocs?
No.
That's the correct answer. Well, okay. So what's next for you? This is your moment. Plug whatever you want to plug, or just anything you're working on.
No, we just had the record that I did with my buddy Fabio Fabri, who I work with as a sort of musical writing and recording partner, and we made an album under the Slinky Vagabond name, which is called King Boy Vandals, and that's an anagram of Slinky Vagabond.
Yeah.
It was either that or Sly Blonde Vagina. So I kind of thought King Boy Vandals was a little bit more amenable. And
that's your next.
What's that?
That's your next album.
The next album, yeah, we were trying to think of an anagram for the next album, and we're kind of out of them. So we're going to have to actually think of a title. We can't be lazy. But we already started recording that. We've done about 3 or 4 songs already, and we've got some other guests playing on it, as we have on this one. On the current record, got Midjor, who's like a acquaintance of mine who I've known for a while. Dave Formula from Magazine, Richard Fortis from Guns N' Roses. So it's kind of a good group of people, and they're all people that I know either well or reasonably well, and they really add to the scope of the record. And we kind of approached it in a very collaborative way. I really do like the collaborative process. So working with other people that bring in their ideas. I think it's really, it's a great thing. It's kind of what you do in fashion, as a designer. You think the designer walks out at the end of the runway show and they've done all the work, and they haven't at all. It's totally a team effort. I once tried to get my team to come out on the runway with me, the hairstylist, the makeup artist, the stylist, and so on and so forth, and they wouldn't do it. They were just like, no, it's got to be you. No. Well, how about just once we do it? We all go out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a team effort. So,
well, everyone, please go listen to King Boy Vandals by Slinky Vagabond. Follow Keanan Duffty on Instagram. It's just Keanan Duffty.
Everything's just my name. I think I'm the only person in the world with this weird name. I don't think there's anyone else, because Duffty is a really weird name.
It's Tina Duffy.
Tina Duffy at Twitter, or at Tina Duffy.
Oh, I can't thank you enough for being here. This has been just top to bottom phenomenal. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, everyone, just support what Keanan Duffty is doing, and thank you very much.
Cheers.
Follow Bothering the Band as well on all the social platforms, so we can keep having fun like this. Adios.